do feel like maybe I've got too many screens on here at the moment, so I will apologize if you find a little bit of a lag. So I'm going to switch to the presentation and kick off for today's session. Okay, so the DevOps multiverse. So I'm in the process of finishing a book for cognitive engineering, and that will be available for Christmas. So if you don't like somebody or you want to give a present, then you'll be able to pre-order that in December. And then I'm working on a follow-up book with a friend of mine on the Metaverse, which is I'm going to explain a little bit more if you're not familiar with the term. And I'm also going to challenge some of the original kind of DevOps approach. So, at this point, you may be saying, well, why challenge DevOps, right? And I kind of, during lockdown, which you can obviously see by my face here, I wrote this book with Iran, who will be attending later on, and Tarek from Test.ai and Jason Alban, called Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence in the Age of DevOps. And, I talked about DevOps and how it's kind of matured and how things have moved on. So, I've probably been practicing DevOps for at least 10 years. And you can probably see here on the left-hand side that I did a DevOps one. You can see the Gartner source, which I always thought was the best around behaviors, technologies, and processes. And it had 28,000 views, and that was back in 2015. So, 6 years ago. And I kind of talked a lot about DevOps and WinOps and did a few courses. And then I kind of moved on to kind of, challenging kind of some of the core concepts, which is what I'm going to be doing today. So let me move on to, well, what is the metaverse, and kind of, again, what does my kind of credentials sit for talking about the metaverse? So I'm sure, if not, you probably have already. If you go to TED.com and type in Jonathon Wright or cognitive learning, you'll see my TED talk, and through my TED talk, you'll see the metaverse, which is this in the background. So you probably can nearly see the dog sat on this virtual trolley, and someone mixing reality with the real world. So kind of part of that is, as you can see, it's kind of mixed reality and augmented reality to blur the boundaries between the physical world and the virtual world. And I'm sure if you've seen Ready Player One, you've probably got a fairly good concept of what the metaverse is. So blurring the lines between technology and the real world. And I came across this picture yesterday, and it surprisingly looks like Julie Gardner, who's registered for this event. So they're not intentional or any copyright associated with that, the Tiki Tester. But part of it is, I've heard this before, this concept of blurring the lines between technology and the real world in a different context. And I remember chatting with Dan North, and whenever he talked about DevOps, he said DevOps is blurring the lines between operations and development, and I really like that, and it was always my favorite DevOps quote. However, it doesn't feel like that's what we've achieved. We've not achieved the blurring of what existing capabilities within operations and development. That actually we've kind of gone about it in a slightly different way, in the sense of what we've done is we've taken what was on this left-hand side, the operations team, and where we had Linux database admins and network engineers and infrastructure engineers, and a whole stack of people in a separate part of the business with the server racks and all these dashboards with geolocations on. We kind of moved from that to what this is on the right, which is this, this concept of kind of a squad. And what we've kind of done is we've brought in our own, or bring your own, network engineers and infrastructure engineers and security engineers, in a way duplicate them, and now the team is a DevOps team, but it's at a siloed level. So some teams are doing fantastic, and you might be listening to this and kind of going, oh, well, we're awesome at DevOps and it's brilliant. But just like Agile, scaling DevOps and scaling Agile are the similar kind of challenges. It may work fantastic in small siloed teams, but to get it at an enterprise level is a different challenge. And I think this idea of not bringing the resources from the left-hand side, the right-hand side, which is operations, and getting them involved, but actually bringing them into the team as separate standalone resources seems like it's fairly counterintuitive. So with that, I'm kind of saying, well, I kind of came up with this kind of example yesterday, and I've got a friend who used to work at the Pentagon, and he set up a cyber AI security firm called Calypso.io, and Davey presented at one of the last events that I did, and his job is to protect systems across the world around AI and the threat of AI. And I kind of looked at this, and I was chatting with my friends at Pump Security the other day, who are all cyber reserves for the UK government, and we've engaged in gigs at the GCHQ and some of these kind of high levels of securities. It feels like what you've done is you put the ownership on an individual to then take that responsibility. And for those who've not seen Swordfish, I would show the video, but unfortunately it's not very PG-13. But what you will see from the video is, he's asked to break into the Pentagon in 60 seconds by John Travolta, and of course, the pressure is obviously quite high on poor Hugh Jackman at this point in time. But I know what Hugh was feeling like, because this was me on Monday with Paul, and you can probably see Paul over here on the right hand side. And as you probably saw from when I started this session, I'm now using 12 screens in my daily job, and as part of that daily job, I start all of my days off at 2:30 a.m. With Singapore and Thailand, and then I moved to 4:30 to Australia and a healthcare organisation in Australia, and then I move up to Europe and large pharmaceutical clients and other clients that we have, and then finally I start my day off in the UK at 9 o'clock, and by then I've already done 6 hours. And I'm definitely feeling this kind of burnout, and a burnout which you've probably seen with this new momentum we see as a post-COVID landscape, right? And so post-COVID and this gig economy is starting to get to this point where the new norm is incredibly challenging. And I remember speaking at Star West back in 2012, and I said, based on stats at that point in time, 212 years are spent per day just people reading emails in the US. Is there a better use of time for that digital grind? Could you potentially look at using RPA? Could you look at using intelligent automation or intelligent RPA to start reading and do, and assigning yourself tasks? So for those who've used Microsoft, Task, you'll probably have seen some of these capabilities where Cortana sends you a message in the morning saying you forgot to reply to this person about this email. So I think we're getting to that point where we know that we've got a lot of different data sources. You probably can or cannot see behind me, I've got Slack and a number of enterprise tools which you can hear pinging in the background because clients are wanting waking up in different time zones. So part of it is I kind of wanted to say, well, we need to relax, right? We need to take a bit of a break, and we need to slow the pace down a little bit. And I kind of looked at this thing, and over the weekend I've been working on finishing up the final reviews for the cognitive engineering book. And Rex Black had sent me a message about kind of challenging a concept that I'd been working on called Dark Canary, which was a combination of using dark launching and canary rollout to do kind of A/B testing in essence, but with more complexity, as in different levels of the application builds running in parallel, but also with rollouts of hidden capabilities as well. So with this emergence of chaos engineering, I think there's so many challenges, and out of that is I wanted to kind of maybe bring in the Matrix 4 to keep things relevant and up to date. And I wanted to kind of say that there is no DevOps, or DevOps doesn't exist. It's a concept, and kind of what Paul was saying is a concept that he was doing in the 80s and the 90s. It's just now got a label on it, and we like labeling things, whether it be chaos engineering or site reliability engineering or digital transformation. We like labels and investments in technology routes. And also, a bit like agile, really, is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. This little a, and are you doing agile, or are you, and this viewpoint goes with DevOps. When I started off doing DevOps 10 years ago, there was a lot of people kind of saying, reading things and then just kind of saying, okay, I'm now going to do DevOps. And there was a few articles that got published with Computer Weekly where I helped a pizza delivery company in Detroit, in the UK and Australia, with DevOps. And part of those quotes that I kind of put in there was around how they were taking on the culture side of things and changing that, and not just kind of renaming infrastructure engineers to DevOps engineers or something like that. It was a real kind of, well, there has to be a movement behind it. So if there is no DevOps, part of it is, without losing all the attendees, or at least half of them dropping off, is, there's a choice really. And what I'm kind of giving you is, you can either listen on, which is only thankfully 10 minutes, so you can always mute it. And potentially we can take the red pill and see how far down the rabbit hole this really goes. And kind of at least challenge or rethink the idea of the core concepts around the fact that at the moment, DevOps is dev-centric operations capability in the standard quote, whereas it should be an ops-centric approach to development, i.e. the end state is operations. And so I want to take that choice, and hopefully you have kind of also not just rage quit and deleted GoToWebinar, but actually you've taken the red pill and kind of said, okay, let's think about DevOps, and can it exist without ops, and what came first? And I joked with Paul about this the other day, and back in the 60s, 70s, and when people like Tom Guild were talking about evolutional design, and which became, I kind of guess, agile in a way, but part of it was, what would happen is you'd get packaged applications. So, you'd get a mainframe, as he kind of Paul mentioned, and then, you get an operations team to manage the mainframe. And then when the packaged application for an accounting software like Sage or whatever was deployed, you would then potentially customize it. And then you'd introduce a team called development, which would customize that packaged off-the-shelf solution for you and make it work for your organization in a particular way. And so ops, in that case, kind of came as part of the solution to keep the solution and the lights on in a very core IT landscape. But, I joked, and I kind of put a link out yesterday about kind of saying, well, what I'm seeing is these additional silos being introduced. So, if you want to talk about DevSecOps, I've got a client who wants to talk about SecOps, and then part of it is, it's then people are saying, oh, well, actually it's not, it's biz dev test ops, or it's AI ops, or it's a version of a combination of these 6 or 7 things. And every implementation I seem to be doing at the moment is using knowledge graphs and Neo4j, and part of it is representing this relationship, is that it's trying to understand that there is not, one kind of team to rule them all, or one methodology to rule them all, but actually it's relationships that we have with other people. And I think Paul said it best when he said, it's DevOps isn't it's not a technology, it's a human process. And part of it is, I think, the relationships between nodes, in this case silos, is kind of a way that we're able to break down. Well, I'm in security, and because I'm in the DevSecOps capability, I'm building static code analysis with my Zap or something else like Vericode. But then on the right hand side you've got ops, and they're saying, well, I'm actually a part of SecOps, is I've got these DAS tools and scanners that are happening in production to avoid cross-site scripting or vulnerabilities, and doing incident management for security breaches. So I'm now part of SecOps. And part of it is, yes, security is a discipline or an engineering skill that you've got, but that doesn't mean that you can't be advising the business and their CISOs around what security is, and be also involved with the operations around how to protect firewalls and the WAFs and the world. So part of it is, I think we need to get away from silos, and also this idea that a relationship is actually a gate where something gets passed over, some kind of information exchange, some kind of activity exchange, and make it into a relationship. So that was the way I wanted to represent the metasphere for a second, around what ops dev could potentially be, and kind of throw that out to people. And then I kind of wanted to kind of quickly kind of say about, how do you dodge those DevOps bullets? How do you kind of avoid the, that kind of idea that, these things could be possible, and that you're not tied to a single team to do a single delivery on a single sprint, which always seems to be 2 weeks. And continuing that rant, I've got a client at the moment which I love dearly, who's doing low code development. And so when I got involved with them, I kind of said, okay, from a biz perspective, let's define the business, what we want, and do business process modeling, notation, XPDL, and define what we're expecting using model-based kind of techniques, which is why you'll probably see behind me the model-based testing book, as I'm sitting as the chair of the ISO committee for 29119 part 8 around model-based testing. So I kind of said, okay, let's model it. And then when it comes to the next step, we can use a wireframing tool or a rapid prototyping tool to work out what the UX and the CX should look like, and how people want to interact with that system that you're developing. So within 1 day, they built the business process, created the wireframe, created the stories, the executable specifications, and the low code team developed the application with the back-end processes and released the application within a day. And then it was tested and validated by subject matter experts and champions within the business. And in essence, it could have gone live. And now I would class this as the third mode, being 60% being core IT, which is keeping the lights on, notoriously operation centric. Then we've got adaptive IT, which is this agile, iterative kind of development and DevOps. And then we've got this final mode, which is fail fast, the fluid IT, the fail fast, learn rapid, kind of let's do a prototype, let's put it out, let's do the validation from our platforms to understand the solution. So I think there's that entire extreme from one side to the other. And so if we can build and develop a low code, no code solution, and I know Paul made the mistake of saying no ops, if we could get to that point, then potentially we could see a whole new revolution coming in, and that's that 10% within organizations that need that kind of agility. But I also learned the hard way, and it's kind of probably one of the reasons that I've got so many screens open at the moment, is that I was doing a talk. So the other thing that I do, as probably see by my t-shirt, is I'm also part of the ISO 29119 standard for AI and AI in testing. And so I was on a panel discussion with Tariq King from Test.ai and my good friend Iran, who hopefully will be joining us today. And I'd been, the week before, I'd been talking about site reliability testing. So taking some of the site reliability engineering components and looking at what that means for testing, i.e. testing in an operational landscape. So think about real user monitoring isn't usually synthetic, it's just synthetic happy path tests, and moving those into more realistic scenarios, even kind of principles of chaos engineering, but actually within a production landscape, on the shift right landscape. And I kind of said to him, you know, I was halfway through presenting, and then you can probably see on the right hand side that actually my M2 drive just exploded and burnt out. And yes, I was using Windows 11 and I was using direct storage, and I knew based on reading the reviews that all the M2 storage vendors are saying that we will no longer honor the warranty if you're using direct storage in Windows 11, because it puts the hardware under so much stress. So, you know, ignoring that warning and ignoring that there's no software without hardware, I then realized as it broke halfway through that not just the HAL, the hardware abstraction layer, which we're kind of very you know, used to just kind of, you know, ignoring and kind of abstracting to, that actually there is a hardware component to all of this. And, you know, we're kind of getting to that, you know, throwaway economy of cloud compute and IOPS and, you know, abstraction, that we don't care about what the underlying technology or IoT or interfaces or hardware or switches. And a lot of the solutions that we're looking at the moment are around giving that capability to understand, emulate things like network virtualization, network function virtualization, you know, to create more realism in people's tests and allow for those kind of site reliability and chaos engineering techniques. So as I'm kind of coming to a close, and actually probably will finish on time to hand over to Anna, is I was, as you can probably see here, last night watching the Tim do his keynote. And if you see in the top left-hand corner over here, running Windows Edge, there's a real droppiness and choppiness of the actual video stream. So you can probably see it's bouncing backwards and forwards. So, you know, I keep on refreshing it, clearing it out. It's a Chromium engine, so it should be working absolutely fine. And again, you know, I refresh it and I've got this awful experience of watching it. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, how's that possible when, you know, my Firefox browser is smooth, my Chrome browser is smooth, you know, this shouldn't happen. And, you know, you might say, oh, well, it's because, you know, the GPU is not powerful enough, but, you know, I'm running a 3060 Ti with 32 gig of RAM and 30 odd cores. You know, there is not a problem with the actual software and hardware capacity. There is an issue between the GPU and what is happening with Edge. And I don't know if this was deliberate in the sense of, you know, they just didn't want any Microsoft people to actually be able to watch it. And you have to have a Mac to be able to enjoy watching the live stream as a bit of a protest. But, you know, as you can probably see now, I was using the latest version of Edge. You know, it's not like it's a evaluation version. So, you know, this happened on 3 machines that I tried to access, all using Windows 10, Windows 11, all using Edge. And to me, this is a hardware, you know, driver issue, HAL issue, not a software issue. And I think we've got to start thinking about more than just software and think about the whole stack and what that end experience is. Because if I've got that experience in the top left-hand corner, my user experience or my digital experience is incredibly poor. And, you know, that's what your end customer's doing. And yes, we can talk about performance engineering and security and everything else that supports this, but I actually think the conversation needs to start at opening our horizons and going at looking at the next generation of how we test complex systems.